Hey food students, are you ready to make some blueberry streusel muffins? I definitely am. I can't wait to get started. So, I posted a recipe to Canvas. It's called Blueberry Streusel Muffins by Betty Crocker. And my version is right here. Some things that you want to review in a recipe before you ever get started. You want to look to see, do I have all of the ingredients that I need? Make sure you look down the list. Make sure you have enough of each one of those ingredients. Sometimes we might think that we have 4 cups of flour and we actually only have 2. Double check to make sure that you have everything in a recipe before you even begin. You also want to make sure that it serves the amount of people that you want it to serve. This particular muffin recipe makes 12 muffins. So if you wanted to make 24 muffins to take somewhere or to give to a friend, you want to make sure that you double that. Or if you are okay with 12 muffins, then you're good to go. You also want to reference the time of a recipe. This particular recipe says it takes 35 minutes. So if you're looking to get a quick breakfast in and you really don't have time to make something that takes 35 minutes to make, then maybe you want to choose something else. Or maybe you want to make this recipe when you have a little bit more time on your hands. Last thing that you want to check with the recipe is that you review the directions and make sure that you have all the equipment that you need for the particular recipe that you've chosen. If a particular recipe such as this requires a muffin pan, which this one particularly does, and you don't have a muffin pan at your house, you probably can't make muffins. But what you can do is you can turn some recipes, such as banana muffins, into banana bread instead. Maybe you have a loaf pan and maybe that's an option for you. So make sure that you read through the directions, make sure that you have all of the required items that are needed to actually execute the recipe, again, before you begin. So let's get started with our blueberry streusel muffins. This recipe, don't put your paper on the stove, remember that? Can catch on fire if the burner was on. Mine is not. Anyways, before you get started, make sure that you wash your hands thoroughly. You should lather with soap and warm water for at least 20 seconds. Give it a rinse. I like to think about 30 seconds or singing happy birthday 2 times through or saying the ABCs 2 times through is a sufficient amount of time to kill all bacteria or virus that might be on your hands. I already did that, so I'm ready to jump into this recipe. With this particular recipe, it first tells me that I should preheat my oven to 400 degrees. With any baking recipe, something that's going into the oven, that's a good first start because you don't want to get your muffins all ready to go in the oven and then realize that you have to turn the oven on. Then that takes you about another 15 minutes to wait. So I'm going to do that first. I'm going to hit the bake button on my oven and then adjust my temperature to where I need it to be. Most ovens will beep whenever it is the temperature that it should be that you've selected. So if you hear a beep, 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 that's usually the sign that it's done. This one will actually beep here in a minute. Oh, actually it won't. I take that back. So now it's preheating and it's gonna be doing its work while I'm doing my work getting the muffins ready. So for this particular recipe, it's gonna make for me 12 muffins. You do need the little muffin cups. I have made muffins without the muffin cups before. You just need to make sure that you spray the bottoms with PAM or cooking spray to prevent sticking at the bottom of your muffin pan. So if you don't have the muffin liners at home, it's not a big deal, but make sure that you spray or grease your muffin tins with some type of non-stick item. If you didn't have PAM, you can use shortening and just get the grease down in there. I like the muffin liners because they're easy to take with you somewhere or, you know, transport. So another little tip is I like to spritz the bottom of my muffin liners with a little bit of cooking spray. That helps the muffin liner to peel off of the muffin itself. Just a little trick that I've learned along the way. And I'm gonna set these aside because I'm not quite ready for those yet. We have to make our batter. If you remember back to our measuring recipe, we measured out some different ingredients. We measured out 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, packed down the brown sugar. We also measured 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon that follows the directions. We also, I measured previously, 1/4 of a cup of flour. Remember with flour, you spoon it in and level it off. And what I'm gonna do with these dry ingredients here is I'm gonna mix those all together. We don't want any chunks of cinnamon, you know, stuck in our streusel. I like to mix all of those dry ingredients with my hands before I start adding my butter. Now, whenever you're making a streusel, it's probably gonna tell you that you want cold butter. By cold butter, we don't mean from the freezer. That's way, way too cold. We want it straight out of the refrigerator. We need 2 tablespoons of butter, which means that I wanna look at my butter line here, and I wanna cut off 2 tablespoon amounts. And you can just use a regular butter knife to do that. I'm gonna open up the paper here, and we first wanna start with some little chunks of butter. So I'm gonna cut this into smaller individual pieces, and then we're actually gonna use our pastry blender to cut it into even smaller pieces. So when you're just cutting butter normally, you can just do it with a butter knife. You don't need a pastry blender to do that. And even with this recipe, we are gonna use a pastry blender. You wouldn't necessarily have to use that. You could use a fork and mash things up, or you could use 2 knives in a crisscross motion. So let me knot the butter thing there. Wipe my hands off here on my kitchen towel. So now we're gonna break out that pastry blender. Again, if you don't have one of these, don't fret. You can use a fork to mash up your butter. But basically, we want to integrate that butter, or cut in the butter, as we, that's the term that is used in the cooking world for incorporating butter into dry ingredients, if you remember that from the equipment quiz last week. So we're going to mash up our butter. And sometimes you're gonna get your butter stuck on the outside edges. You can go ahead and clean that off with the knife that you cut the butter with initially. And then you continue along. So this is gonna take a couple minutes. So I'll show you whenever I'm finished what this actually should look like. All right, let me show you what this streusel looks like. Isn't that delicious? Hopefully you guys can see that. If you notice, it's kind of crumbly there. It's not all one big ball, but it's not dry anymore either. The whole goal with your streusel is to be able to put that streusel up on top of your blueberry muffins, which we will do right before we bake it. I'm gonna set this to the side, and now I'm gonna turn my attention to our liquid ingredients, or wet ingredients, for our muffins. Muffins, a particular muffin method, the typical muffin method, involves wet ingredients being mixed in a bowl together, dry ingredients being mixed in a bowl together, and then a combination of those ingredients with a whisk. You don't want to overmix your ingredients, and that's why we mix the wet and the dry separately, so whenever they come together, that we can make sure that we don't have to overmix them. So if you remember back to a previous video, I measured out 1 cup of milk using our liquid measuring cup, and now I'm gonna measure out our oil. We need 1/4 of a cup of vegetable oil, which is the very bottom line of a 2-cup liquid measuring cup. Make sure that you get down to eye level whenever you are measuring liquid ingredients. There we go. Perfect. Because you want to have the exact amount. All right, I'm going to pour in our oil. And oil gives usually some moisture and flavor to a recipe that you're using. I do not use olive oil as a replacement for vegetable oil. You can use canola oil, a vegetable oil, or even coconut oil, a mild flavored oil. Olive oil tends to have too much of a pungent taste for baking recipes, so I typically do not use it, although I have read some recipes that involve it. So make sure to check to see what your recipe calls for. Next thing we're gonna do is 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. Now, resist the urge to measure your vanilla over your bowl, because it comes out really fast sometimes, and if it comes out too fast, you get too much into your bowl and it's more than you want. So my recommendation would be to measure it over the sink or over a garbage bowl, which I have right next to me. So I'm going to pour my vanilla over into my measuring spoon and very carefully pour that into your measuring bowl. Last thing we're gonna add is our 1 egg, which I cracked into a separate bowl in a previous video that you saw. I'm gonna add my egg into my other liquid ingredients and immediately stick that into the sink so you don't get egg anywhere else. And we're gonna take our whisk and whisk together those liquid ingredients. You just wanna make sure that those are all nice and combined. It's gonna have like a, kind of like a yellowish, whitish appearance to it. It is gonna get a little bit foamy on top. That is completely fine. Bubbles are fine. And that is it for our wet ingredients. Now let's take a look at our dry ingredients. Some of these I did measure out before in a previous video. I did 1 cup of flour, which I'm gonna add another cup to. I have a half a cup of sugar and 1 tablespoon, which is also equivalent to 3 teaspoons of baking powder. We're gonna add to this a half a teaspoon of salt, which again, with salt, you wanna make sure that you measure this not over your ingredients bowl because it comes out really fast. You either wanna do it over a sink or over a garbage bowl, just like we did with the vanilla. So I can kind of shake that off, or you can use a knife. And if you notice there, it is exactly a half a teaspoon of salt. Into the bowl it goes. All right, let's add 1 more cup of flour because we do need 2 cups of all-purpose flour. You can use whole wheat in this if you want to. It's really up to you. Again, a review for flour. You want to spoon that in just like so until it is heaping. And then you also want to have a knife or a spatula in which you can level off those dry ingredients just like that. That's gonna go into our dry ingredients bowl, and I'm going to very easily use a spoon, the spoon that we use to scoop out our flour. I'm just gonna use that. You can use a whisk as well, but that whisk is kind of already wet and I don't really wanna transfer the liquid into this dry ingredient bowl. But whenever you use a spoon to measure and mix all of your dry ingredients, that baking powder and that salt are evenly distributed around your dry ingredients, and so you don't get like little chunks of baking powder or little chunks of salt. That's no bueno. So we are all good here, and now we're gonna add our dry ingredients into our liquid ingredients here, just like that. And we are going to whisk those together. You would not want to use an electric mixer for muffins unless the recipe specifically says to do so, because the electric mixer tends to allow us to overmix, and we do not want to overmix these muffins, okay? You want your muffins to be tender and light and fluffy. So I just mix it until I don't see any white floury ingredients anymore. So if you guys can see that in there, the batter is runny, and there are little lumps in there. Lumps are okay. They will work themselves out in the baking process, but the worst thing that you can do is overmix it, but you do definitely want to make sure that you integrate all of those dry ingredients into your muffin batter. All right, I'm gonna ditch my whisk here because I am done with that. Into my sink we go. Let me grab out our last tool. Do you guys remember what this is? Think to yourself, what is it? Rubber scraper or a spatula. This one is going to be used to scrape down the sides of the bowl, or in this case, we are going to fold in our 1 cup of blueberries. In this recipe, you could also do 1 cup of peaches, or 1 cup of chocolate chips, or 1 cup of apple chunks. You could do a lot of different add-ins with this muffin batter. It's really just whatever you feel like adding to it. You could do half a cup of white chocolate chips and half a cup of cranberries or something like that. That would be delicious. I almost want to make that one now. So we are going to add in our 1 cup of blueberries. I washed these before I use them. And you could use frozen as well. You do not need to thaw frozen blueberries. You can just stick them in frozen and they will bake up in the oven. So what we're gonna do a folding motion. And when you have ingredients like blueberries, you don't wanna crush those. So you wanna make sure that you fold them in. You would not wanna whisk them in because they could get mashed and turn your batter into a blueberry gross mess. But this also prevents you from overmixing, and you just wanna take, when we fold, you're scooping under and folding over, scooping under and folding over, just like you would like a kitchen towel that you were folding or a bath towel. Your goal is to just get those blueberries all integrated into that muffin batter. Now, it is time for us to load up our muffin cups. So I'm gonna take my spoon here, and you can kind of scrape down the sides of your bowl, and I would keep your spatula in there because you might need to use your spatula in a few minutes. I like to use whatever row is closest to me. I like to load that batter up first, okay, or those cups up first. So take your spoon and you can scoop, and we're looking to fill our muffin batter up in our muffin cups about 3/4 of the way full. You do not want it completely full because these muffins are going to expand. Baking powder with that ingredient that we added there is meant to allow for rising and expansion of baked goods. That's why we use it. But if you load these up the whole way to the very top, they're going to explode all over your muffin tin, which again is no good. You're gonna have a lot of cleanup to do after that. But you also wanna make sure that you fill up your muffin cups enough so that they make for a really nice, pretty looking muffin. Don't wanna skimp people on muffins. And if you happen to have more batter than you actually have muffin cups for, you can just get another tin out, or you can do another batch in a couple minutes after the first batch comes out. Now, what I like to do is I like to turn my muffin pan to whatever is closest to my batter bowl. So you don't have to like reach the whole way over there to fill up those cups. Again, it saves you from, you know, making a whole big giant mess all over your muffin tins. So I'm gonna get these loaded up and I will show you what to do with our streusel in just a minute. My muffin cups are 3/4 of the way full. And now it's time to finish these off before they go in the oven with our streusel. So we made our streusel with the butter and the brown sugar and the cinnamon and the flour. And now we're going to sprinkle some of that streusel that we made with our pastry blender right on the very tops of those muffins. And that gives for a good sweet crunch at the very top of your muffins. I feel like this is what sets those, like, you know, bakery style muffins apart from maybe muffins that you're gonna buy pre-packaged at the store. I think streusel is probably my favorite thing to add on top of muffins. Now, if you don't want to make streusel or you don't have the ingredients to do that, if you have the raw crunchy sugar, that also tastes really good at the top of muffins. So you can kind of do whatever you want. I've seen different recipes that have like pumpkin seeds or sesame seeds or different types of embellishments on the top. So you can go a lot of different routes, and your goal with this is to just try to make sure that you have even amounts of streusel on top of all of your muffins. So also I forgot to say that after I was done loading the muffin batter into my muffin cups, you definitely want to wash your hands because that muffin batter has raw egg into it. And if you don't wash your hands, then you cross-contaminate to basically everywhere around your kitchen. So make sure that you wash your hands. This didn't have raw egg in it, so I don't necessarily need to wash my hands before touching my oven. So this is gonna go into the oven, and our recipe says, if you take a look at our recipe, it says 18 to 20 minutes. Now, how do I choose 18, 20, something in between? Keep this in mind whenever you're doing a baking recipe. You can always add time, but you can't take time away once the time has been added. So I like to set it for the least amount and then check my muffins once that buzzer goes off. And then I'll show you I'm gonna set my timer for 18 minutes. And again, my oven is at 400 degrees. I'm gonna set these in the oven, bake that for 18 minutes, and then I'll show you how to check whether your muffins are done or not with a very common ingredient that actually two different tools that you might have in your kitchen. So we'll check those out in about 18 minutes. I can't wait. All right, so my buzzer went off for about 18 minutes and I'm going to check my muffins. I like to make sure you pull the cooling rack out first. If you have an oven stick, you can use that. But if you don't, try to get as close to the pan as you can so you don't have to reach your arms into the oven. I like to take the muffins out of the oven to do my test. Push your rack back in. Don't shut your oven off quite yet, because if they have to go back in, you want your oven to be on, but we'll talk about that in a second. So, two tools that you can use to test to see if your muffins are done. And by me visually looking at these look pretty good because they are golden brown at the top. But the more important thing is to see if they are done in the inside. So one option that you have is to use a toothpick. You're gonna stick your toothpick down through the center of one of your muffins and pull it out. Now, here's two things. And I see that there's blueberry on the end. You can kind of ignore that. But what we're looking for is either a clean toothpick, which is what you see there, or crumbs. If you see a couple little crumbs on the sides, crumbs are okay, and clean is okay, but batter is bad. So I really don't have an example to show you of a battery toothpick here. I will actually try another one again on another side of the pan to make sure. Sometimes parts of your oven can be hot or cool. And if you notice, this is also clean and perfect there. So that is a good sign that our muffins are done. Another thing that you can use is a butter knife. You can take your butter knife and stick it down through the center of one of those muffins. And if it comes out clean, just like you see here, and there's a little piece of something on there. I'm not sure what that is. Anyways, if you see a clean butter knife, you see some streaks of blueberries, that's okay, because the blueberries are hot in there. But if you see batter on your butter knife, that's also a sign that the muffins would need to go in for a couple minutes or so. So now that I've established that my muffins are done, you definitely want to make sure that you shut off your oven, because sometimes you just get wrapped up in doing other things. And you know, for me, it's my boys 2 and 4, they distract me. You don't want to leave your oven on. We call it in this class, burning down the house, and you legitimately can burn down your house that way, and you don't want to do that. So what I do is I let my muffins hang out in the pan for a minute, maybe 2 minutes, until they cool down so I can handle them with one of my fingers. You don't want to let them sit in the tin for too long because they actually continue baking because this tin is hot. So what you're going to do after a minute or two, as long as you can touch the top of the muffin, is take a butter knife and remove those to a cooling rack, and they can cool down completely on that cooling rack. Now, another thing about leaving your muffins in the tin, by letting them sit in there, they can actually steam and it continues to cook, and then they can be soggy muffins. So you definitely want to get those out of your tin as soon as you can. And if you have your muffins that you're not using paper for, like the little paper cups on the outside, they should come out nice and easy. If you have to, you can kind of run your butter knife around the edges to kind of loosen those up. And you want to remove all of, if you have any parts that are like stuck like that, you can just kind of tap them very lightly with your knife. And once you get those all removed to your pan, then you can enjoy your muffins, share them with other people. If you have a sibling or your mom or dad or your friend that is making these with you, or waiting for them to be done in the oven, they smell the nice delicious smells of your muffin, you should definitely share with them, because that's the nice thing to do. I cannot wait to dig into these muffins. I hope you guys give some muffins a try. If you like blueberries, maybe this is a route that you want to go. I'm really excited. These turned out great. But the thing is that whenever you try recipes for the first time, don't be upset if it doesn't turn out exactly as you had hoped. Sometimes maybe you measured something incorrectly, or you mixed something too much, or you missed an ingredient. Don't be down on yourself. Sometimes things don't always work out, but sometimes they turn out beautifully, just like our muffins did here. So I hope you all had a great day. I hope that you learned some things about muffins, and I look forward to seeing the muffins that you make or baked goods that you make in the future. I hope you all have a great day. I miss you here at school. Even though I'm here and you're not, I still can share some of my knowledge with you. So I wish you all the best of luck in the kitchen. See you soon.